And welcome back to the Damn Podcast. I'm your host, Carter Bahns, and with me, as always, is BeaverBlitz.com publisher Angie Machado. Angie, we took last week off, but we're back now to recap some baseball. We've got a lot of football news coming our way on the recruiting trail. But for everyone who's following us and watching us live here, we're getting an earlier start today. We're going at noon today on this Friday, June 17th. Angie, today's a big day for you. What do you have going on this evening?
I've got my kid, my youngest, my baby, his 8th grade promotion. So nice mug, by the way. Yes, we are. And I have to give a shout out that I've actually had 2 Blitz members reach out to me thinking that my oldest graduated high school this year, just checking in on me, wondering how my mama heart was doing. But he's a junior this year. So next year will be the rough year. Have had a couple really good friends, family, we call them, friends that are family, kids graduate. But no, 8th grade promotion tonight in the rain at Sherwood Middle School. That is where I'll be.
You're going to brave the elements tonight. I love it. Yes. Oregon State's graduation was about a week ago today. I think it was last Saturday. If I remember correctly. Yeah. Corvallis was crazy last weekend with all of the people down here for graduations. Down in Eugene, you had the NCAA track championships, of course, in Corvallis, the Corvallis Super Regional. So I heard, many stories of people not being able to find rental cars, hotel rooms, you name it. In fact, the Auburn baseball team that was down here for the Super Regional was staying up in Wilsonville, so about an hour drive away. Yeah. One of their media members was stationed in Tigard, and then the ESPN crew was out in Newport. So
weird. Why would they stay in Newport?
No weird. Hotel rooms, I guess. Newport's closer than Portland, but
I guess.
Yeah, it was a wild weekend down here, and the elements did not behave themselves for graduation down here either. My high school graduation in Sherwood a handful of years ago, Angie, I sat through a torrential downpour for an hour, so I feel your pain there.
Yeah. So, and I just want to give a quick shout out to you and JP. It has been a whirlwind couple weeks here with baseball, actually month with the Pac-12 tournament, and JP with his JP's Weekly Walk-Off, which are super in-depth. When he sends me a JP's Weekly Walk-Off, it is about anywhere from 8 to 12 pages of content. And then Carter, you have been killing it with content and travel and games and late nights. So thank you from all of Beaver Blitz Nation, because it's much appreciated.
Hey, it was a fun ride. That was, I didn't know what to expect coming into the season. And we're going to talk about, was this a successful year and what were our preseason expectations in just a minute here. But, going into the year, I didn't really know what we were getting ourselves into in, year 2 fully of Mitch Canham. Obviously, there was that COVID year in 2020, but the full second year of Mitch Canham, I didn't know what we were going to quite get. I didn't, up until a few months ago, I didn't know that we were getting a Pac-12 baseball tournament, and that sent me to Scottsdale for a week. 2 weeks of postseason baseball in Corvallis, great atmosphere at Goss. It has been a pretty fun ride, and it's sad to see it come to a close, but we're we can look at it in the rearview mirror now. So we're going to spend most of this pod recapping the 2020 baseball season, but we also have plenty of football news because we're actually only we're less than 2 months away from fall camp, Angie, which is hard to believe as we sit here in the middle of June. Still feels like winter in Oregon. I don't know how many of our listeners are sitting in Oregon right now looking out at this beautiful cloudy and wet day in late June, but here we are. So lots of football news coming up. But Angie, I want to start with something, the most recent thing that happened, that has Oregon State ties was last night. I know you're not a big NBA fan. I know, you don't tune into basketball as much as I do, but I got to ask, did you watch last night's game? Finals game 6, I believe it was, with the Warriors winning that series 4-2.
I did not. I did not watch.
I had a feeling.
None of it. But GP2 won. Eric did fill me in last night that GP2 got his ring. So congratulations, Gary Payton II. But yeah, I really care less about NBA basketball.
Yeah. Well, it's the alumni card there is what you care about, which is, hey, that's
It is.
that's all we care about on the damn podcast. It's the Oregon State connection. So Gary Payton II gets his first ring, incredibly well deserved. If I'm sure most of the people out there listening to this are diehards enough to know his story, but to essentially work his way up from the lowest level to the absolute highest level over the span of just a couple of years was pretty impressive.
It is impressive.
Watch him, improve his game, work up through the G League, finally get a shot with the Warriors, and battle through some adversity all year to eventually, be a key role player on a championship team. Pretty cool to see, to see all of his hard work pay off.
It's awesome. It is so awesome and well deserved.
He, of course, we talk about that adversity. He bounced back from the broken elbow that he suffered at the hands of former Duck Dylan Brooks. So I think it's fitting, that the Oregon State guy gets the last laugh after, what was described as a dirty play by many, but to come back and and kind of, I guess, expel those demons. Getting rid of, recovering from an injury of that severity in a pretty short amount of time and come back and play the entire finals. Again, just another feather in Gary Payton II's hat. So
yeah,
I actually saw some photos after the game. His dad, Gary Payton, the OG Gary Payton, was there on hand in Boston to watch that. So pretty cool to see what I believe is now the 9th Oregon State product to win the NBA Finals.
So cool. So cool.
That's it's pretty rare we get basketball news in June. But I think I felt like it was important for us to touch on that. Let's get into baseball, because that's the meat of today's shows is going to be recapping the baseball season. Angie, you didn't make it down to Goss for any games, but I know you were tuned in all year. So I feel like we can have a pretty good conversation on how we both felt this season went. Obviously, I was boots on the ground in Corvallis for the entire season. I think I missed, I want to say maybe I missed one series when I was in Greece.
Yeah.
But other than that, I was there, and we talk about braving the elements. Talk about a year that was not suited for baseball, Angie.
Yeah.
We don't. This isn't a weather podcast, so we're not gonna. We're not gonna go too in depth. But I think you have witnessed it firsthand up in Sherwood at your kids' games. Just kind of take us through what this season has been like from a weather perspective.
Oh, it's been horrible.
I've never seen anything like it.
No, it's cold. I mean, that's the thing. We're June. I mean, Jack started playing in May, I guess, and April, and it's been cold. I mean, he had a game Wednesday night, and I was wearing my down puffy long coat, down coat, not even the jacket, the long coat. It's cold. It's been rainy. It's been damp. And Oregon State battled that then, of course, throughout the entire season, since they start a lot earlier than that. But not necessarily. And then to be able to have to switch from cold Pacific Northwest and some of the travel up here to then, Scottsdale, where it's 100, Tucson, where it's over 100. That's not an easy task for these guys. Good thing they're young. They can handle it a lot better than us old people.
Yeah, it was funny. I went down to Surprise for that first 4 games, that first weekend of the season. And it was about 70 to 75 degrees, sunny, perfect baseball weather, right? And then come back up to Corvallis, and I believe we got 1 game in at or above 70 degrees.
Yeah.
Which is just unbelievable, because I mean, that's obviously it's Arizona, but Arizona in early February had better weather than we saw the entirety of this season. And I don't know, Angie, if I've ever seen a season where we didn't get a single series of dry weather for a whole series. But I don't think we did this year. I think at least one game every weekend in Corvallis, there was either rain or, heavy wind or something crazy like that. But no, that's I think for me, that's the one silver lining of, I guess, one of 2 silver linings of this baseball season being over. One of them being I finally get a break, and the other being can stay inside when it's wet and not go stand outside and try to get quotes after a baseball game.
Yeah, not much of a break though, Carter, because like you said, now we have football starting here in a month and a half, 2 months, and that means a lot of previewing and fun stuff ahead. But yeah, baseball is we have a whole rundown here, but what were your thoughts? I mean, I know we talked at the beginning of the season that we both had really high expectations for this team. Did they meet your expectations?
I think they exceeded them, to be honest. I didn't think going into the year that this was necessarily an Omaha team. I thought that they had the potential to get there. But it wasn't until I saw them week one down in Arizona scoring, 50 something runs over the span of 4 games. It wasn't until then that I said, okay, this team actually has what it takes to get there. So as the season went on, I started to feel like, okay, this team actually could make a run at this thing. There were points where I thought Oregon State was as good as anyone in the country. And that's tough considering, Tennessee was out there doing stuff that the 2017 Oregon State team did. By the way, that 27 Oregon State team finished the regular season 1 game better than Tennessee. So Tennessee did not quite edge them. But no, going into the year, I thought, regional, probably host a regional, but everything after that was going to be, the cherry on top. The fact that they host a regional and a super regional and get to the super regional final was pretty impressive. And I think is honestly a very good sign moving forward. With Coach Canham at the helm, the fact that he was able to do that in year 2, I think, many people out there would consider that ahead of schedule. I don't know where you're at on that, but I would say it's ahead of schedule.
Yeah, I agree. I really think this team peaked just a little too early. I look at that Auburn team and they really started peaking right during the regionals. It was a team that wasn't expected to do a whole lot, make a lot of noise, but that regional run, they played really well. Their bats were going. And I think Oregon State peaked I would say they peaked probably about a month too soon. Yeah, about a month and a half too soon. So, it seemed like there were some struggles on the mound. There were some struggles at the plate. So, but yes, year two official full years of Canham, I think Oregon State has to be excited with where they're at. And honestly, I think as a fan, you have to be excited where Canham is building this team and just hearing from the players and how much he's really carrying on that whole family atmosphere that Coach Casey really brought and really building this team around the players. And, there was a blurb during the broadcast where they talked about how they recruit and they bring guys in who would be, top rated guys, and they spend time with the current players. And if the current players say they're not a fit, Oregon State backs off on recruiting them. So it's really, they have a system in place and it seems to be paying dividends.
I think, one of the testaments to the culture that I was able to witness, unfold this year is, to your point about family, just the amount of times that the word family is used. You see it in the stadium too. For example, down the left field line underneath the Banners beer garden area, you go in, you can walk in that door into the players walk into that door into their clubhouse, and the first thing you see on the wall as you turn to the right is a placard to the locker room that says family room. So it's the family room, not the locker room. They have what they call family at bats, which are productive at bats. Maybe it's drawing a walk, maybe it's getting deep into the count, maybe it's bunting a guy over from first to second. That's a family at bat. We hear this over and over and over again. And then you start to hear some of the players use that terminology. And at the end of the year, it's Mitch Canham saying it's tough when family has to split up like this. It's Justin Boyd saying it's tough when you have to say goodbye to your family. That is 100% Mitch Canham's doing, building a culture where these guys genuinely do feel like brothers. And I think that is something that is so, I guess, unique to the Oregon State baseball program, where I think every sport, feels like a brotherhood at Oregon State, but you don't see it manifest quite like it does in baseball. And I think that is part of the reason why Oregon State has so much success year in and year out, is just the chemistry that they're able to build and maintain and, quite frankly, never lose.
Yeah, I think you see that even with the guys then when they do move on to the league. You see so many guys coming back. You see guys in the stands. I even saw some guys that I went to college with that played baseball at Oregon State that were back, and so I think he's doing a really good job bringing those guys that didn't play for Coach Casey or Coach Canham, bringing those guys back in the fold. And do you think it's easier to do that in a baseball program where you maybe have a smaller roster than say football?
Well, I think it helps, but then, I mean,
But then basketball
it might still be too soon to go here, Angie. But I mean, the basketball roster only has like
yeah,
15 guys,
yeah,
and look at
yeah.
what happened there. I think that was a different circumstance, just with I mean, we have talked
Yes, we've
on and
talked.
on and on about this, but I think that was a little different. What helps at Oregon State is that you have the track record of winning.
Mhm.
And so you can be selective with the guys you bring in.
And
As
winning
you were
breeds
mentioning
win.
earlier,
Winning breeds winning, and it's
right?
something. I tried to explain it to Jack, who's playing baseball. His team this year is really just they haven't gelled, and they don't have that.
Hmm.
And I mean, to the point where they were sitting on the bench the other day with guys up to bat, and it was like they weren't even paying attention. It drives me crazy, but
Yeah,
that's something it can be hard to do, and getting those guys to believe in that, and then have each other's back. I mean, we saw Dernetti have an error at one point, and the teammates were just like, yeah, he'll do something else and make up for it,
yeah.
and that's really their belief.
And sure enough,
Yeah,
he did. He drives in a couple of runs and that all important Corvallis regional final
it was
against
regional.
Vanderbilt.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I think what Canham's been able to do culturally at Oregon State.
mm-hmm.
Certainly, it's very reminiscent of the culture that Pat Casey
Mm-hmm.
built, and I think obviously, Canham being a Casey alum, somebody who played for Pat and won a couple of national championships. I think you can. I think now in year 2.5, as we enter, this off season, you can kind of start to see like, oh yeah, Pat Casey really rubbed off on him in this area,
Mm-hmm.
or this reason is why Pat Casey handpicked Mitch Canham as his replacement. There are a lot of similarities between those two guys. I will say the personality type is very different. Pat Casey was very much, X's and O's only. We're not talking about, anything deep in post game press conferences. We're strictly business. It's all of that. Mitch Canham is very much, an outgoing guy and very willing to give you a 5-minute answer if you're looking for it in a press conference. So I think you see some differences there. But when it comes to building a program and coaching in game, I think you really start to see some of those similarities there.
Yeah, definitely. What was your favorite storyline this year, Carter? I know what
That's
mine
a tough
is,
one.
but
I
what
want to
is
hear
yours?
yours first because a
Mine's
couple
gonna
of them
be
come to mind.
mine's unconventional, but I have to go with the fans during the regional and super regional.
Okay.
To see Oregon State fans, that New Mexico State pitcher when he
Yeah.
and
Ian
I forget,
Mejia.
yes, so he pitched amazing 7 innings, and Oregon State gave him a standing ovation, and it was just a
Hmm.
classy. Here's a group that smaller school, and to really have that kid's back and to show him the respect that I thought he earned. And then seeing that forward into the Vandy final, and then also seeing that into Auburn. The fans were packed. They were loud. Auburn might say the fans were a little raucous, but I think at the end of the day, they know their baseball. And there was some very questionable officiating, home plate umpires. So, and I think both sides could kind of argue that it wasn't one sided, but I think Oregon State fans were. It's a knowledgeable group and fun to see that support.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I wrote here in our rundown, I wanted to talk about the atmosphere at Goss, and so I think that's a
Yeah.
great segue. I'll share my favorite storylines here in just a minute, but I think that leads into it perfectly. Goss Stadium holds 125,100 fans over the span of, I want to say like 35 home games or something like that. It was, I believe, one of the highest totals of home games in Oregon State baseball history. In fact, it might have been a record, whatever it was. Um, But yeah, no, to see 125,000 plus fans pour in there over the span of a year, the average, which I tweeted out, but I don't have on the top of my head, was close to 3,700. I want to say like 3,679, perhaps. That mark was a school record on top of the total attendance. So, by all accounts, this was the the most attended baseball season in Oregon State history, which, to your point, really showed up in the postseason when they're packing 4,100 fans in there. I think what was most impressive about the atmosphere and the attendance numbers are that the top four, I believe, by season's end, I think the top four most attended baseball games in Oregon State history all occurred this year. And I think now, I mean, I don't have the list pulled up in front of me, and it doesn't update throughout the year. It's just in the media guide. But I believe about 6 or so of the top 10 most attended baseball games all occurred this year.
That's awesome.
There were multiple times that record was broken. There were multiple times where, you'd see it be like 8th or 9th highest attendance in Oregon State history. It's pretty cool to see all of that unfold in the span of 1 year. So I think the fan base is really, it's really invigorated. It's really behind this team to a level that we've never seen before.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so awesome. And then as far as, I guess, storylines, I think Pfennig's coming back from the back injury was great. I thought Travis Bazzana is one that I'm excited for the future because I think there's a lot of potential there. We saw it early, and then I kind of maybe slumped a little bit, but I'd love to hear yours because you were there every day seeing this unfold.
Yeah, well, one of the ones that I wrote about during the season that I really keyed in on, and then this individual made me look really good for touting him to the extent that I did. Jaron Hunter, his emergence in the middle of the year as a reliable fourth starter. I wrote a piece for BeaverBlitz on kind of his rise. This is a sophomore who, came in after the COVID season, so he didn't have that time to bond with, his teammates through the pandemic. He kind of had to, pave his own way in this roster that had some continuity there from the 2020 to 2021 season. And he came in last year as a freshman and pitched a little bit, but not much. It was mostly like an early season guy, one of those guys who gets a lot of run down in Arizona, but then not so much afterwards. But then this year, he really emerged as the fourth starter in Oregon State's rotation, which obviously is big because most weeks you're playing 4 or 5 games. And so you're going to get a lot of playing time. And he struggled at times until the middle of the season when he went down to Eugene. Those were 2 games that I made the drive down to Eugene and I was there. And so I saw it in person, what he was able to do against the Ducks this year, shutting them out twice, one of them at home and then one of them in Eugene, I believe. That really caught my attention as, somebody who looked like he was starting to come into his own. He was starting to strike guys out. And then as the season progressed, you saw him not only pitch in Arizona in a big game, but pitch in a regional in a big game. And then finally it culminates in him cracking the top 3 on the pitching staff, taking Jacob Kmet's spot in that decisive Super Regional game. And I mean, there is no bigger spot to pitch in this season than Game 3 of the Corvallis Super Regional. So again, somebody who last year was almost somewhat of an afterthought on this pitching staff in the span of 1 year, improving and coming into his own. And I think all but securing a rotation spot for next year. That was one of the more impressive things that I witnessed this year.
I agree. And how about Ben Farrar too? If we're going to stick with pitchers, I thought what we saw from him, especially in relief, I thought I just love his attitude. He's got that bulldog mentality and just a fighter. So that was a fun one to watch too.
Yeah, Ferrer out of the bullpen, I think was, he kind of stole the show for that bullpen, which struggled at times. This was another storyline that I wanted to touch on here was, I think your point about Oregon State peaking early was very much true. I think that stretch in late April to very early May, where we saw the bullpen kind of turn things around. Obviously, they struggled for the first about half of the year or so. I think cost Oregon State some games, blew some save opportunities. That stretch of the season where they started to turn things around and really lock things down, I think that was the peak of the season, and it's unfortunate that they weren't able to do that later on.
Yeah.
But Ben Ferrer was the one guy, he was the one constant in that bullpen where you look at that hot stretch and you see him, pitching at an extremely high level. I think he went like something like 9 innings without allowing a run or something. But that's a guy who did it before and after the hot streak.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the entire rest of the bullpen was really only performing at a high level in that 3-week stretch or so. But Ferrer did it all year long, and so I think we're gonna touch on here in a minute next year's roster. I think that's a guy who you're not going to see back in Corvallis. I think he did enough this year, after transferring in to really boost his draft stock, and I think that's a guy who's going to go relatively high as a pretty high leverage reliever potential in
I want to hear what your roster looks like. I mean, I think Jerpy, Melton, gone, Boyd. Let's just hear. I'm curious what this roster looks like, because I know you've been doing a lot of research on this. And
I don't want to give too much away here, because I do have a piece that's going to go up on BeaverBlitz probably this weekend or Monday. Just taking a look at how this roster might shape up going into next year, who's going to leave, who I expect to get drafted, who's in the transfer portal. But I'll throw out some locks here, just because I want to save some of the opinion stuff for that piece, so we can get people to BeaverBlitz. There's just know that there's something coming that you're going to want to check out. So these are some of the locks. That Mitchell Verberg is not going to be back. That Reed Sebi is not going to be back. Those guys exhausted their eligibility. They're the only 2 players on the roster who are not eligible to come back, which, again, is a very unique thing to Oregon State, where you never see more than 2 or 3 guys say, yep, this is it, no matter what, because everybody who leaves is getting drafted as a junior or redshirt sophomore. But Mitchell Verberg, after 6 years at Oregon State, is done. Reed Sebi, after a couple of very strong years out of the bullpen, is also done. In the transfer portal right now, there's only one that I'm aware of, and that's Paul Myro IV, who actually came in as a designated hitter middle of the year, just kind of inexplicably got thrown into the lineup and had a really good game in his first game, and then that was pretty much the last we saw of him. It's a bummer to see him in the portal, because I think he provided some really solid depth at shortstop, which I think Oregon State needs right now. But for all we know, he could come back. I was going to say, if you're in the portal, he's always eligible to come back. He's just in the portal at the moment. Some of the guys who we know will be back for sure, as long as they don't transfer out. There's some big names here, Angie. You got Travis Bazana, Jacob Kamatz, both of those guys, freshman All-American. Garrett Forrester obviously really took his game to the next level.
He's one that he peaked the right time.
100%. A guy who hit something like 500 down the stretch in the postseason, obviously was the Pac-12 tournament player of the tournament, MVP, was all Corvallis regional team. Somebody who I think has thrived in the postseason in his 2-year career. Obviously, he hit that walk-off against Dallas Baptist in the Fort Worth regional last year. So somebody who plays his best baseball at the end of the year. He will be back as well. Jaron Hunter, who we just talked about, I think he slides into a starting spot in the weekend rotation. Jabin Trotsky, I'm really excited about what he's going to bring to the infield next year. In fact, I see him taking Bazana's spot at second place, and Bazana potentially moving out into the outfield, where Oregon State's going to have 3 vacancies. So Bazana, we saw him play a little bit of center field in the Pac-12 tournament. That's something that's well within his skill set. And I think in order to get Jabin Trotsky into the lineup and onto the field, you might see Bazana move out there. Trotsky could potentially play at shortstop as well. But I think, you look at his arm strength, you look at, where the coaches want to play him. I think he's probably going to slide into second. But that's somebody who I think Oregon State fans should be really excited about, because obviously he made an impact this year as a true freshman. Tanner Smith will also be back at catcher. So if Gavin Logan decides to go pro, there's a replacement in the waiting. If Logan decides to come back, then you've got a pretty nice 1-2 punch at catcher once again.
Am I the only one that every time Gavin Logan, and then I kept thinking Logan Ice?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me I'm not the only one.
No, early on in the year, the whole Logan thing at catcher.
Yeah, Logan.
Yeah, I had to catch myself.
Okay.
Mason Guerra will also be back. He spent a lot of the year at DH. Got a little bit of run at third base as well when they were kind of rotating guys through. Thomas Ducart, younger brother of Jake, got some opportunities as a pinch runner this year. I think he could potentially, develop into a starter in the outfield. Brady Casper played a little bit this year. He'll be back as well. Victor Quinn as a pitcher got a few innings. He'll be back. Tyree Reed is probably one of the more important returners this year. He sat out last year. He sat out this most recent season with an injury. But this is one of the highest rated recruits in Oregon State baseball history. And to get him into the outfield next year when, again, you don't have any of your returning guys coming back, you have to replace 3 starters in the outfield. Putting him out there as a redshirt freshman, going to be absolutely huge. I think this guy's going to be a star. He should be healthy for next year. Jason Hibbard got a tiny bit of run at pitcher. He'll be back next year. Justin Thorstensen, a utility guy, can play both ways. He's back as well. Ian Lawson pitched. He'll be back. David Case got, I think, an inning or 2 down in Arizona. David Grew got an inning down in Arizona. And that pretty much rounds out the guys who played this year who will be back. So obviously, you lose some of your best players, but I think what you have coming back is pretty big. The last guys I want to touch on are the guys who are draft eligible who I expect to sign. So you mentioned it already with Justin Boyd, Cooper Jerpy, Jacob Melton, Wade Meckler, Ben Ferrer, and I would even throw Jake Fennigs in there. I would not expect to see those guys back next year.
Okay. Look at that.
So that's kind of the
dropping knowledge.
Yeah, that's the not so ground shaking stuff from a piece that will be out this weekend or on Monday at BeaverBlitz.
So you'll definitely want to check out BeaverBlitz. Make sure you're following Carter on Twitter if you're not on BeaverBlitz all the time, but you should be on BeaverBlitz all the time.
Exactly. That will be that'll have I'm trying to figure out exactly how I want to format that. I have it pulled up right here, but I think I'm gonna try to predict who's draft eligible and will sign, who's draft eligible, might get drafted but wants to come back, everything like that. And then I think I'm going to throw in a potential opening day lineup as well. So I'm going to try to cover all of the bases there, make some predictions. I know it's not going to be 100% correct, but I have had a lot of people asking me, who's gone, who's back for sure. And I think that's going to answer a lot of questions. So
sounds great. Can't wait.
We got some more baseball stuff to talk about here. Let me pull up the rundown again. All right. So I wanted to give some of these guys a shout out. Some of the individuals who were recognized nationally at the end of the year. So in case anyone out there missed it, Cooper Jerpy was named the National Pitcher of the Year. My favorite part of that was seeing the Pac-12 conference tweet out, "Never a doubt," when he didn't even win the Pac-12 Pitcher of the Year award. So there was, in fact, a doubt, and it was the account that tweeted it out who was, responsible for that doubt.
Yeah.
That was pretty entertaining. But Jerpy, as well as Jacob Melton, Justin Boyd, Jacob Kamatz, and Travis Bazana all earned All-American honors. Obviously, Kamatz and Bazana were freshman All-American. Justin Boyd earned a second team honor, and then Jerpy and Melton have been consensus, unanimous, first team All-Americans. So
and
two
Jerpy,
more to the all-time list at Oregon State there.
Is Jerpy still in consideration for the Golden Spikes?
He is a finalist. He's one of three or four. He's the only pitcher on there.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I think National Pitcher of the Year I felt like it was kind of a lock, to be honest. But I think Golden Spikes, I think he's going to get edged by Texas home run king, RBI king Ivan Melendez, who has just done like
Killing it.
superhero stuff
Yeah,
down in Austin. So that's a tough one to beat. That's like, it's like throwing Cooper Jerpy against Adley Rutschman. I don't think anyone could argue for Jerpy in that. And that's not a slight against him. It's just you've got a guy who's doing otherworldly things down in Texas. But so those guys were all Americans. Angie, we talked a little bit about, our preseason expectations and everything, but I want to ask you, by your accounts, was this a successful season?
Absolutely.
Or were you disappointed that they didn't make it to Omaha or compete for a national championship?
Well, I think obviously yes, and in a way, just when you make it to a super regional, I think, and you're one game away, was it? It just you'd love to see him move on.
2 runs away. Really,
I was going to say I think it was 2 runs. But no, I think when we talked at the beginning of the season, I thought this was a regional team, maybe a super regional team. So I think what they accomplished was, more than I expected. More, especially like you said in Mitch Canham's second year.
Yeah, and I think I wanted to try to come up with an analogy to sum up what Canham has done early in his career, but it's difficult to compare baseball and football, just because what Jonathan Smith inherited on the football side was, so much worse than what Mitch Canham inherited. But I think the best analogy I could provide here is what Mitch Canham did, getting to a super regional final in year 2, is somewhat akin to Jonathan Smith winning the Alamo Bowl in year 2 or year 3 of his tenure. And obviously, on the football side, that would involve turning a program from a 1-win team to, one of the best in the country. So I think there's a little bit of hyperbole there, but just in terms of accomplishments, put yourself in Jonathan Smith's shoes and say that, oh, you're an Alamo Bowl winner 3 years into your head coaching career. I think that's kind of similar to what we saw.
Well, I would
as far as the timeline goes and what the scale of the win.
This team was, it was a good team that he took over. So I would almost argue it is more difficult to do what Mitch Canham's doing in keeping them in the top of the Pac-12.
Preventing a drop off. Because I think it's hard to follow a legend. And Pat Casey was a legend. He's won 3 national championships, one pretty recently. To come in and to keep them in contention, I think is something that I didn't expect. I thought there would be a bigger drop-off. Yeah, the one thing I will counter with there is that had the 2020 season been played in full, I think Oregon State would have finished the year substantially below 500.
Yeah, true.
So, but that's year 1, and obviously the cabinet was a little bit empty. You had a lot of guys decommit, transfer. When during the interim year with Pat Bailey, you saw a lot of guys leave, and then again when Mitch Canham was brought in, more guys continued to leave. And unfortunately, good for them. Unfortunate for Oregon State. You've seen them go on to have really successful careers. Daniel Susak at Arizona comes to mind, one of the best catchers in the country. But outside of that 2020 season, which I think thankfully was curtailed for Oregon State, no, there has not been a drop off. In fact, some of Canham's first 2 full teams have been more successful than a lot of Casey's teams, which is really impressive. And I think seeing what Canham has done so far has to make you pretty confident as an Oregon State fan that the Beavers are going to get back to Omaha. I mean, as early as next year, if not, within the next couple of years. So, to your point, I think you have to characterize it as a successful season because it defied so many people's expectations. It kept the program on par with its elite status. Finishing, I think the one disappointment is that they didn't win the Pac-12 regular season title, considering they had that thing all but wrapped up going into the last couple of weeks of the year. So
that they really did
as a disappointment.
I mean, you look at, for as much as Stanford really kind of came alive the last month of the season, last 2-3 weeks, Oregon State kind of took a dive off a cliff.
Yeah. Two teams that really went in opposite directions down the stretch. But I mean, even then, Oregon State put up a good fight against them in the Pac-12 tournament. Obviously the Beavers were running on fumes at that point and had a tie game going into the 8th inning. So
yeah.
I think Oregon State, what it was able to do down the stretch, despite some of its challenges and some of its struggles, I think to make it as far in the postseason as it did surprised me a little bit,
definitely.
to be honest.
Definitely.
So, man, I think we covered pretty much everything we wanted to baseball wise. I feel like we're leaving something out. I'm sure we are. It was a long season, 4 months, all sorts of storylines, all sorts of ups and downs. But in the end, another really strong year for Oregon State baseball. And I think, again, moving forward, you have to be really confident that this program is as healthy as ever, if not
Exactly.
at its healthiest point, even more so than following one of the national championships. I think to wrap all of this whole conversation up, to see 2 guys get first team All-American honors, to see attendance records shattered, to see them come 1 win away from Omaha, and to witness, the chemistry and the bonding that has taken place under a very, very short tenure at head coach under Mitch Canham. There's no way you can say there. I don't think there's any way you can be disappointed with what Oregon State accomplished this year.
And we've talked about this in other pods that after 2021, I questioned, whether Mitch Canham was the guy. And I said I need to see more, but he's answered those questions.
Yeah, that's one last point on Mitch Canham. I think the fact that he came back to Oregon State, a place that obviously means so much to him, as a 2-time national champion and All-American, the leadership that he had with Coach Casey, to see him give up a potential job in MLB, which I think he was trending towards pretty quickly, says a lot about his commitment to the program. And even after a couple of successful years like this, you're not going to see him take another job. He's here for the long haul. But I think that's a wrap on our baseball stuff. We're going to come back here in just a second and talk football. Angie, you've got all sorts of news from the football side of things.
Yes.
But first, BeaverBlitz.com is proud to be the leader in Oregon State football and men's basketball recruiting coverage. With access to the most talented and well-connected recruiting analysts in the nation, we're your source for all the latest scholarship offer, official visit, and transfer portal news. Year-round coverage of Oregon State football, men's basketball, baseball, and everything else within the athletic department makes BeaverBlitz.com the all-inclusive destination for in-depth analysis of all things Beaver sports. Join us today with a monthly or annual subscription to gain full access to our VIP articles, team of experts, and message board. Membership also grants the ability to chat with fellow Beaver fans and gain behind-the-scenes intel in the lodge. You'll get all of this and more, including access to all of the team sites across the 24/7 Sports Network with your subscription. So join today to keep up on your favorite teams and your rivals too. So Angie, we had talked a little bit about recruiting, the lodge, all of that stuff there in that ad read. This is the time of year where that stuff becomes really important. So, man, I don't even know where to begin because this has been such a busy month for Oregon State football recruiting, but can you kind of try to maybe summarize it, and then we'll get a little bit, we'll dive deeper into it after.
So June,
put it all together.
June has turned into a really busy month for recruiting because guys can start taking official visits. So Oregon State, this is actually the one weekend that's a little quieter because they have a really big mega camp, a couple actually big mega camps, one at Sac State, one up at Lewis and Clark, where both camps have coaches from around the Pac-12 and all over the country. So coaches are on the road right now, but the past couple of weeks have been really, really busy for official visitors in Corvallis. They are paying dividends as well. So, and then one more really big recruiting weekend coming up, the weekend of the 24th, 25th, 26th. So, really big time for football. They're getting commitments. They're getting a lot of attention, and some surprises, some guys that are taking a look at the program that maybe might surprise some people. This is also move-in weekend for all those guys that signed back December and February. So they are moving in this weekend. So all those new freshmen, new faces are moving into the dorms starting tomorrow. And yeah, football. Carter, you think you get all this time off, but football is going to be right back around the corner. I think the biggest commit that I want to kind of point out is Aiden Childs. So quarterback out of Downey, California. And this is totally my opinion, but I know a lot of Beaver fans are really broken up when 4-star Braden Dorman chose to commit to Arizona. Okay, big arm. I get it. He has a big arm, but I will take Aiden Childs any day of the week over Braden Dorman. He is a mid to high 3-star. 887 is his ranking right now, composite. But this is a guy who has such a huge upside. He's very raw, and he's been turning heads just this year on the camp circuit. Greg Biggins says that the sky's the limit for him. And what I love about him, Carter, and you know my feelings on this, I like big arms, but I would rather have a dual threat guy any day. And Aiden Childs is that guy. So what I love about this is he's already helping to recruit other players to Corvallis. That quarterback is such a cornerstone for not just the offensive players, but also the defensive players as well. So, he's the field general, and he's going to be helping to pull an entire class together. And I love this pickup by Oregon State.
Yeah, Childs was the one guy that I really wanted to dive into here. He's the headliner of the class so far. And you mentioned his ranking, his 3-star status. I think, everything I've heard and seen regarding this kid tells me he's probably going to be a firm 4-star guy after his senior year, because, he hasn't. So what? He had an injury and then like a COVID shortened season. So he hasn't really played a full year since his freshman year. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So I think, once you see him play a full season, I think he's going to get a lot of attention this year, and he could be a really flashy get for Oregon State. And I think to lock him up early is important. Obviously, the one thing you worry about there is, maybe does somebody swoop in, give him a nice little NIL offer and lure him away. But the thing that tells me that he's an Oregon State commit through and through is when you see him recruiting other guys on Twitter, when you say, nope, I'm locking it down, not taking any other offers, not taking any other visits. I'm 100% a Beav. That gives me a lot of confidence moving forward, even if he does blow up, which I think he could very well do.
I think he could. And I think that's one of the areas Jonathan Smith has done a really good job, and his staff is they tell guys, they don't want that commitment. We're hearing stories on the recruiting trail of some of the coaching staffs pressuring guys into committing and doing some things that maybe don't set well, especially with parents. And Coach Smith and his staff are very adamant that, if you need to take more time, take more time. We want you, but once you commit to us, we won't be recruiting anyone else, and we expect you to not take visits and be solid with us. Just for those people that like to know maybe what offers Oregon State was competing with, he had offers from Washington. I'm just going to read Pac-12 offers and some of the bigger ones. Washington, that was one of the Beavers' biggest competitors, was University of Washington. He had Rutgers, Oregon offered, K-State, Florida Atlantic, Washington State, and Oregon State. And he had several other smaller schools. I love it on Twitter when I get the trolls that come out and, is he any good? Is there any, I'm like, well, Lanning liked him enough to offer. So, you be the judge of that. So,
Angie, while you're running down that list, tell me which visits he took, because I believe he came to Corvallis directly after a trip to Pullman. Is that correct?
He did. So he had taken unofficial visits to these places as well. He had been to Washington. He had been to Washington State. He'd been to Oregon State. And yes, you're right. He came in right after that visit to Pullman. I think he was planning to go to K-State, but again, that's all been canceled. UCLA was kind of in the mix, but he is set on Oregon State. He plans to enroll early, so he would be here in January of 2023. That's a big time get. And I think to your point about peer recruiting and something that I just touched on, to get a quarterback early in your class is always huge. But when he's as good as Aiden Childs is, and when he's active as he is early on in the process, I think the sky's the limit for this class, Angie, right? I want to ask you what some of the other commitments that Oregon State's gotten this month have been. But I think you look at Aiden Childs alone at this point in the year, I think it has the potential to be Jonathan Smith's best class. Oh, I think so. And I think there's potential. Right now, they're ranked 53rd in the country. That's with 5 commitments. So they also picked up Zakiah Saiz out of St. Thomas Aquinas, Fort Lauderdale. After his visit, he was on the same visit weekend as Aiden Childs. Edge rusher, which we all know. I mean, you and I harp on defensive linemen day in and day out. So he's another one it's interesting. He's a mid 3-star ranked, but he's coming from one of the top programs in the country in St. Thomas Aquinas. That produced Giovanni Bernard. Some of the top guys out on the East Coast go to St. Thomas Aquinas. David Wells is another pickup, wide receiver, a 6-foot wide receiver out of Lakewood, Washington. David Wells is one, again, and he fits that Beaver mold in that Oregon State saw him at a camp at Western Oregon, and then he stopped by Oregon State's camp that weekend. It was last weekend. And coaches offered him on the spot. So here's a guy that doesn't really have a lot of attention. Oregon State offers him and then asks him to come for an official visit the very next weekend, and he commits. So they might not be done with commitments from this past weekend's visitations. And then the June 3rd, I'm just going through the visit list right now. They actually do have Leonard Ayu on campus right now, linebacker from Kahuku in Hawaii. Kind of a last minute
big time program there.
Big time program, another big program. But I look back, where's my June? Simeon Pale, offensive lineman, was in last weekend. He had actually changed his visit from the first week in June to last weekend. From all accounts, loved his visit. That would be a huge pickup. Interior lineman, high 3-star ranked. He's actually still visiting Cal, BYU, and Utah, however, so that's going to be one to watch. Cooper Jensen was in town. He is actually a tight end commit already, so he was with Aiden Childs, so they kind of got to bond there.
And what I have seen, on Twitter and, by accounts from Brandon Huffman, our recruiting expert at 24/7 Sports, is that those two guys could be somewhat of a package deal. There were some questions about Jensen, maybe decommitting or looking at some other options. But I think what I've heard is that Aiden Childs is really starting to lock him down.
He is. And then, and the other one that he's going to be probably trying to keep in is Dorian Thomas, the other tight end commit. He will
tight
be
end you, Angie.
Next week. It is tight end you.
2 more big recruits, and it seems like you see that every year.
And with Oregon State really struggling to land some of the taller wide receivers, I think that's kind of the way you're going to see that go.
Yeah.
A couple more names.
And you can always move a guy out to receiver too. If think about Luke Musgrave. If you want to go the route of, hey, let's bulk him up a little bit, but not tight end bulk. You could have seen Luke Musgrave, as like a Kyle Pitts type build receiver, just because I think that's where his skill set lied. Now, I think, Oregon State needed the depth at tight end, so they moved him there. But I mean, you don't see it very often, but I do think there's a potential, hey, especially at Oregon State, where the depth is off the charts right now at tight end. Maybe one of these guys plays receiver. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be really interesting. Isaiah Chisholm is a name to watch. He visited during that same weekend. Jalen O'Neill is a safety. Couple names. The one I'm really watching too. Andre Piper Jordan was in last weekend. Big time cornerback out of Washington State, Federal Way, Washington. Canceled his Oregon visit. Is going to be deciding here in the next couple of weeks. One I'm watching closely. It'd be a big pickup. And then I'm also watching Kelsey Howard. This one's going to be big. He's a 4-star edge rusher, D-line. This is what Oregon State needs. Besides a D tackle, they need D tackle, but Kelsey Howard would be a difference maker if they're able to get him. And the recruiting story in this one is unreal, because he was supposed to visit Oregon last weekend. Midweek, Oregon tells him that they're only accepting visits from guys that have already taken an unofficial visit, which he had not done yet. So he was talking to Oregon State, and they said, well, come see us. He did. He loved his trip. So stay tuned to that one.
That's one of the best stories I've heard from the recruiting trail this year.
Yeah. So that's one to watch. I know he's down. I know he had a great trip to Arizona. I know Washington's been in the mix. But by all accounts, he had an amazing trip to Corvallis, and he should be announcing either within the next month or so. I think he's kind of nailing down when he wants to announce, when he's going to make his decision, and then hopefully we get him on CBS Sports 24/7. That's kind of the plan. as
Get
far
those
as
live commitments,
the live
24/7
commitments. And
sports. Those
so
are fun to watch. Those are
they
really
are
fun.
super fun. So
CBS Sports HQ, anytime you see on a guy's 24/7 profile live commitment coming, tune in because those are always super fun. They get their family in the background. They're live on, on streaming services, and it's cool to see those guys get their time in the limelight.
Yeah, so Arizona's and Washington, I think, are the two biggest ones to watch there. And then coming up, couple big, the ones CJ Fight, D tackle out of Texas is coming up in the next.
Like the sound of that, a defensive tackle from Texas.
You guys know we need defensive tackles. So yeah, there's just a lot going on right now with recruiting. So the Lodge is the place to be. We also kind of keep you up on their Twitter handles so you can, do some things.
Go show them some love on Twitter.
Go show them some love on Twitter.
Yeah. So the story there is Oregon State getting big time commitments early in the cycle, and there are a lot more where that came from, I think, over the next few months as this staff continues to focus on recruiting. And, obviously they'll ramp up for the season in August, but right now recruiting is the big thing. And I think, Angie, you look back at the last couple of years, and it took a while for Oregon State to kind of get started and get the ball rolling on the recruiting trail. And I know that a lot of Oregon State fans and BeaverBlitz members were kind of, wringing their hands at the fact that Oregon State would end the month of June without a commitment and say, what are we doing? Like, this is prime time to be on the trail, getting guys in. This year, with the return to normalcy, no more COVID rules or anything, Oregon State's getting back to normal.
I'll do my bold prediction. I think this
it.
could be the best recruiting class come December that Jonathan Smith has signed during his time at Oregon State.
I could see it. I could very well see it. Angie, priorities moving forward real quick. We don't have much time here, but if there's maybe one or two positions that either you want to see the coaching staff pursue or that the staff is pursuing outside of defensive line, interior defensive line.
D tackle. They're going to need some DBs. So I think we see a lot of safety cornerbacks in this class. I say a lot, 3 to 4, just because they're going to be losing a lot of guys. I'd like to see another wide receiver or two, but I think that's your big ones.
It's funny because, we spend all this time talking about the current roster and previewing it and looking ahead. And, we say, wow, there's a lot of continuity in the defensive backfield or on the offensive line. And typically when you say that about a current team, that those are going to be the positions that you're targeting on the recruiting trail because you've got a lot of continuity there, but it means that those guys are getting really old.
Just think about it. You've got Rajon, you have Jaden Grant, Alton Julian.
Alex Austin will be a redshirt sophomore, but he'd be draft eligible.
He'd be draft eligible. That's just it. There's a lot of these guys that, with the COVID year, they've been on campus for 4 years already. So,
yeah. So those are the positions to keep an eye on. Obviously, stick with BeaverBlitz.com because we've got all of the in-depth recruiting coverage. We are the source for Oregon State football recruiting. You're not going to find better experts out there than the guys that we've got covering the West Coast. And obviously, Angie and I are locking things down on BeaverBlitz, but 24/7 sports, as far as West Coast recruiting goes, you're not going to find anything better. And quite frankly, with Oregon State recruiting at the level that it is, this is the time to check us out and take advantage of some great reports from Brandon Huffman, Blair Angulo, you name it. There's
Greg
guys
Biggins.
all over
Don't
the
forget
place.
my guy, Greg
Biggins. Some East Coast guys. We've gotten some Oregon State guys coming in from Florida, some Texas guys. So some experts out there are doing great work. It's been fun the last month to read reports of, hey, this guy enjoyed his visit. By all accounts, this guy's visit went, about as well as it could have. It's been a really exciting month for Oregon State football recruiting. So with that, we've got about a minute left, and I know that one question came in, so I'm going to pop it up here. How many of the commits will we get and not go pro? This is a baseball. Question. So I'm going to pull up my list here. I've got 17 baseball commits on my list, and I could see as many as 15 or 16 signing with Oregon State, not signing a professional contract. If I can pull it up real quick, here we go. So the one guy that I'm really concerned about not signing would be Gavin Turley, the outfielder. He is probably a top 3 round pick next month. We're actually exactly a month away from the draft. Oregon State fans, you're not going to want to hear Gavin Turley's name called because that's a guy that you want to get on campus. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question really briefly. I could see most, if not all, of the 17 commits signing with Oregon.
But
State.
Harold, you're a member of BeaverBlitz, so you'll get the whole rundown.
Yeah, you'll get the scoop. You will get the scoop for sure. We are at the hour mark, so that's going to wrap it up for us. Coming up at BeaverBlitz, obviously more recruiting stuff. I mentioned the baseball kind of end of the season, looking ahead to next season piece that'll be up soon. But we're getting into the off-season content, so a lot of lists, a lot of countdowns, a lot of position previews. That's all coming up in the next month. So there's never really a downtime at BeaverBlitz. We got a lot of football stuff coming up. But until our next podcast, which will probably be pretty soon, I feel like we're going to have a lot of recruiting stuff to talk about here. And then, we'll do some football off-season stuff too. So we're not going to be strangers to YouTube and to Spotify and everywhere else you listen to us. But until then, you can follow me on Twitter at Carter Bahns. She's at Angie Machado 1. And be sure to stick with BeaverBlitz throughout the summer for baseball, football, men's basketball, and pretty much just about everything else.